The Orlando Magic shocked everyone this season, finishing a top 5 seed out east and playing an extremely close 7-game series against the Cavaliers in the first round. And like with all young teams that take a major leap, people think the Magic should go out this offseason and try to sign some big name free agents to help them take it to the next level. The names that have already been attached to them are Paul George, Klay Thompson, and OG Anunoby. And all of those guys would definitely address some needed problems on this roster, mainly being shooting and another offensive creator. But those guys are also a lot older and would probably cost this Magic team a lot just to pull away from their current situations. The Magic have two glaring problems I think they need to address this offseason. First is the playmaking or lack of playmaking on this team outside of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner to a lesser extent, and the overall three-point shooting talent and making ability on this team. The Magic ranked 28th in assists per game last season, and we're near the bottom of the league in three-point shooting when it comes to percentage, attempts, and make. Those guys would definitely address, at least Paul George would address the playmaking and shooting needs, while Klay Thompson and OG would address the three-point shooting need. The Magic can get players though to fill those gaps who are younger and would definitely cost this team a whole lot less. To me, there's two major schools of thought the Magic's front office can take this offseason. The first being our core of Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, and Paolo Banchero is good enough, and we just need to add additional pieces around them to help support their growth. The other school of thought would be, okay, we have a great young duo in Franz and Paolo, but we definitely need to bolster our talent around them, with Jalen Suggs not necessarily being able to take a next leap and be a true elite point guard of the future. I fall into that camp more. I think Jalen Suggs is a great player and he took a massive leap this year, especially with his three-point shooting, but he's just not a threat with the ball in his hands. And if you're a point guard and shooting guard are both non-threats with the balls in their hand, so much of the playmaking duties and responsibilities then fall on Paolo and Franz's hands, and teams that are led by duos of front court players often fall short in the postseason because they lack a guy who can set those guys up and get them easy looks. Look at the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and how they routinely struggle staying healthy as well as executing in late game situations. Look at the Celtics with Tatum and Brown. Those same type of problems kind of show up right there. I think this team needs to upgrade the point guard position and give them more offensive talent overall. And if they're taking that type of school of thought, I think the first and major player that they should look at is Malik Monk. Monk does everything that this team kind of needs. He's a good three-point shooter off the catch and off the dribble, and he has taken a massive leap as a playmaker, averaging a career high 5 assists this season. Monk is only going to be 26 and would fit the timeline pretty well, and he would also add just an elite dynamic scoring threat to the backcourt who can score at the rim, in the mid-range, and from three. Yes, they would probably make him a little undersized moving Suggs to the shooting guard position, but I think his tenacity and overall defensive intensity would definitely make up for any type of size he would give up. And Monk is also not like a terrible defender, and I think surrounded by better defenders all over the court, he'll look better. Another player who would be kind of a step in this direction but not as major would be a guy like DeAnthony Melton of the 76ers, who was injured this year, but he has been a very consistent starting to backup point guard for the last few seasons now. He does a little bit of everything when it comes to just table setting, getting guys involved, and he can knock down an open three. He's also a pretty solid defender and wouldn't compromise this team on that end at all. Now going back to the first school of thought I mentioned, which is we believe in the core of Suggs, Banchero, and Franz, and we just need to add additional talent who's younger and better fits their timeline. I think the first player, if they're trying to take that approach, they should look at is Gary Trent Jr. Once again, Gary Trent would help bolster their three-point shooting, providing an elite off-ball threat that teams would have to keep an eye on at all times. And he would also just give them a little bit more versatility from the two guard spot, being able to move Gary Harris, a guy who is good, but he's pretty much just a worse, older version of Gary Trent Jr. in my eyes, and I think he's slightly smaller. You would then move Gary Harris to the bench, Gary Trent Jr. starting, and have a pretty good shooting guard rotation. Gary Trent Jr. also has shown some ability with the ball in his hands to score and create his own shot, being able to get to the mid-range and the rim, and finishes at a pretty good rate there. I also think he would be a pretty decently cheap signing for the Magic, considering he didn't have the best year with the Toronto Raptors. Another player who I think fits the mold of just like a nice additional piece would be Obi Toppin of the Indiana Pacers. Obi has been playing a major role in the Pacers' deep playoff run, being one of their best players night in and night out, and a major part of their bench for the entire season. He's taken a major leap as a jumper, and he would give this Magic's team a really nice dynamic transition threat, something that they have lacked all year. Obi Toppin would be a great pairing in the front court alongside Franz and Paolo, having shown this year that he can play some small ball 5, is a good enough shooter, and an overall decent enough defender where I think they could survive, especially if they have Jonathan Isaac on the court as well during some of those lineups. Now, another player who does fit into this category, but is definitely older than the other names I've mentioned, is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope of the Denver Nuggets, and I think KCP would kind of just do everything that a guy like Gary Harris would do, or a guy like Jalen Suggs is doing right now, but just do it slightly better. He's a better three-point shooter than those guys. He's a better defender than those guys. Older, he brings a championship mentality to this team, having won 2 rings with 2 different organizations, starting in both of those situations. KCP is like one of the best 3-and-D guards in the entire league, and I think he's shown enough offensively at times where I think this team can convince themselves that they wouldn't be terrible starting him and Jalen Suggs in the backcourt at the same time. The only problem with KCP is that they would definitely have to pay him a little bit more than some other teams to get him away from contenders, and he would be older than pretty much everyone else on the roster except for a guy like Joe Ingles. I think the Magic are in one of the best positions this offseason to really improve their roster, but it's also important to note that year over year improvement isn't guaranteed, and the league can get better around you rapidly fast. Look at the Sacramento Kings this year. Finished a top 3 seed out west last season, dealt with a little bit more injuries this year, and they didn't even make the postseason. Teams like the Grizzlies also have a similar fall off due to injuries and suspensions, and it's just success in the NBA isn't guaranteed. I don't think the Magic should stay complacent, but I also don't think they need to overload and throw big bags of money at Paul George, OG Anunoby, and Klay Thompson. I think there are players out there in the free agency market that would improve their roster, continue their timeline of building with young stars, and be an overall major upgrade to their current players. I love this Orlando Magic team. I think they're going to be great for years to come, and I think Paulo is really showing everyone that he was a no-brainer first overall pick 2 seasons ago. I'm excited to see what they do this offseason and how this roster looks next year. Thank you for watching, and take it easy.